So it brings me great pleasure to have a chat with the very, very talented comedian, video game writer, animator. He just does everything, basically. He's a very talented chap. Alasdair Beckett-King, thank you so much for joining me, Alasdair. How are you doing?
Hello, Laura. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I really appreciate you having a quick chat with me. I know you're mega busy, so thank you so much for popping on.
I am generally busy, but this
Yeah.
week actually it's very little on. I tend
Oh,
tend not to, because I work for myself.
yeah.
I just usually I just don't really do any work in December usually, because it's
Yes.
like
I mean, that makes sense. That does make
it's
sense.
Christmas now, isn't it?
Yeah.
I should be on holiday. I shouldn't be working, so I don't. So
Okay. Well, good.
I'm exaggerating, but today I've done basically nothing.
I know you're like, I actually do do some work.
I am actually quite a hard worker, but today I cleaned the inside of my computer.
Right. Okay. How
I
did
saw.
that go?
I don't know. Do you know Dan Marshall of Size Five
Yes.
Games, of Ben and Dan fame? I'm
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
sure
Yeah.
you know.
Lair of the
Well, he
Clockwork
posted.
God.
Yes, Lair of the Clockwork God. Very good game. I'm always recommending it to people. I sounded like Donald Trump there, didn't I? Very good game. I am always recommending it. Well, he posted a picture on Blue Sky of him cleaning his computer, which had spider cobwebs in it.
Oh
It was
God. Okay.
really bad. And so I thought I was shamed by his picture into cleaning my computer, and then mine was fine.
Oh yeah.
It
It's
was,
nothing.
it's not even dirty. So
Oh well.
what has Ben been doing? I
That's
mean,
kind.
Dan been doing? I'm blaming him. I'm blaming his
Well, maybe it's
co-writer
Ben's
now for
fault.
the spiders. Probably encourage the spiders to go in there.
Good. I'm glad you've cleaned out your computer. You've cleaned your computer.
I have.
Um, Now, I mean, I wanted to ask a bit about kind of how you got into comedy, because I'm gonna, I'm very interested to hear about your tour and what you've got planned. I know a lot of people love your sketches, and I definitely want to try and play one of those and just maybe go through it a little bit. But I'm interested, how you got into comedy, and is it something you always wanted to do, or how did you get into that kind of sphere?
Yeah, comedians are divided, I think, into comedy nerds like me and people who are naturally funny, and I hate those people. It's quite a lot of them. There's a lot of really good comedians. You say, oh, they're never really into comedy when they were growing up.
It just happened.
they just are funny. So, oh, sorry. Well, I'm sorry for just watching every episode of Blackadder 1,000 times until I learned what jokes were. So I belong to the comedy nerd, the not naturally funny, not gifted
I mean,
demographic.
I think some people would disagree with that, but anyway.
I welcome the disagreement, but it's still true. So I was too nervous to try and do any sort of comedy in front of people until I was in my mid to late 20s, which is fairly late to start, I think. About 10 years ago, over 10 years ago now that I remember how old I actually am. Well, I live in London, and the good thing about living in a city, if you're into comedy, is that it's quite easy to go to an open mic and just turn up and do 5 minutes, maybe, if you can, of what may or may not be jokes. The comedy industry, like every creative industry, has many problems, but
Yeah.
the bar for entry is quite low. I feel like it has that in common with sort of coding in some ways. Like, obviously, owning a computer is a bar, but or owning a mobile phone device, that sort of thing. But if you've got access to a computer, you can start learning to write a script in Python, or these days you can download Unity or the Unreal Engine for free, and you can make things, or you can write something in Twine. I like how accessible these sorts of things are for people. It's quite easy to start. It's
Yeah.
very, very hard to continue.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
extremely hard to get anyone to pay you, but starting is easy.
Yeah. And were there any sort of people that inspired you to get into that kind of thing? Were there people you really liked watching or enjoyed
I'm
seeing?
always too cringy to name my heroes, because then you just go, oh yeah, that's who you're plagiarizing. So I will avoid doing that. The obvious one is Terry Gilliam, who I always thought, oh, I could just do the animations. Or I could just team up with the greatest comedic minds of my generation and do like the drawings or something. It was always my plan. It hasn't really worked out. Whoever the greatest minds of my generation are, they've avoided me and have not
Oh,
allowed me to team up with them. So I've had to do all of it. But that was the plan.
yeah.
I haven't managed. I haven't managed to start making a series of slightly reactionary comments as Terry Gilliam has
Yes, no.
recently. I haven't done that yet, but it's coming, I hope.
Well, this is the thing though, because that's that side of things. The YouTube videos, all the different sketches and things like that have really. I mean, in my view, have really taken off. I think a lot of people. I think just because you put so much effort into them, and like you say, it is
Yeah.
all you.
Yeah, well, I mean, occasionally, I do use public domain assets, and I do
Yeah, yeah.
borrow things, and occasionally, I've got somebody else in I had some comedian pals help me with the Doctor Who episode because I just don't know the Doctor Who sketch I did a few
Ah,
years ago. Episode, it's like 30 seconds long. Episode, the arrogance of the man, because I don't know enough about Doctor Who. I'm
yeah.
I'm a new Who fan, so
Okay.
I've seen the old ones, but I just don't know them
Yeah.
well enough.
Inside Out. Yeah.
But usually it is largely me. And yeah, no, they did in a small way blow up. I'm aware that the going viral is like a mass. There are people who did a good sketch and are now globally famous, and that's not me. But I have got an audience. I have people who follow me on YouTube, and there used to be a website called Twitter, which it used to be a functional social
I've
media
heard about
site,
that
and
for
you
a
could.
while. Where's it
Yeah,
gone?
I don't know. No one remembers what happened to it. It's the opposite. It's like the Berenstain Bears. It just stopped. Now it's called something else, and it isn't as good. It just doesn't seem right. Um, and yeah, so I during lockdown, a lot of us switched to doing online stuff. A lot
Yeah.
of comedians, and it's good. It changed. It got me I think it got me the opportunity to do a little bit of telly before the BBC cancelled Mock the Week. Almost as if to make a point about me not being allowed on telly. Don't know about that. But like I was in an episode and then they cancelled it immediately after that. So
They're like, this man cannot work on this
no,
channel again.
no, they seem to say. And off the back of that, I was able to go on tour for the first time this year. And, not England is a small country, and I most of my dates are in England. It's not it's not a huge deal, but it's a big deal for me.
Yeah.
It's
I think it's
been
pretty
really
big
nice.
deal.
Someone did get upset. My next tour it's a UK tour, but I only have one date in Wales and one date in Scotland and one date in Northern Ireland. But in my defence, fewer people live there, so I'm going to have to just be more famous.
Right.
Like,
Come on.
if you can persuade hundreds of thousands of people who like me to move to Inverness, 100% I will do a
Come
gig
on,
in
guys.
Inverness.
We're all going
But
off to Inverness.
until that happens, I can't. It's just not feasible.
What was it like doing What the Week?
Actually, not as intimidating as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was still really scared and everything,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it has a reputation of having been a bear pit, of just so highly competitive. And I think it had morphed into quite a different show by the time 20 years later.
Yeah.
A show that was a bit more generous, I think, to the participants and a bit more prepared to put people like me, new people who
Yeah.
haven't got any kind of track record on and give us a chance. So I do think I think it's a shame that it's gone. I hope whatever replaces it is something that also gives not famous people a chance to go on the telly. However, at this point, what's replacing it is repeats of Mock the Week.
Yeah.
So that's kind of annoying.
Well,
Could
you might be
probably
on
just make
again.
more of
You don't know.
I have been. I get residuals. It's like, okay, well, I didn't know that I was going to get residuals. So
Oh,
I get like
really?
£1 if they show it or something. No, I don't know what it is. At the end of the year, I find out I get,
Yeah.
I get a very small amount of money for it being on telly. Oh, I didn't know you'd get that. That's good. But still, it would be nicer to actually just be on the show.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah. I'll see if I can show this to the chat. I wanted to show your sketch, the adventure game one, the every 90s.
Yes. I
retro.
think I offended Charles Cecil personally.
Did you?
This one.
What do you know about this girl? I can reveal nothing of yellow diamond clientele to street trash like you, Hapgood Threadneedle. What about this string? I know nothing about string either. What about these opera glasses? No, I don't know anything about that. Tell me about the compass of Belial. I don't think you should have that. What can you tell me about this hammer? How is that even in your pockets? What about this whistle? What do you... What about this string? What? What about this piece of orange trash? Where did you get that?
I found it on the ground.
You saw a piece of trash on the floor, and you thought, I'm going to put that in my pants. Wait a minute. Combine trash with string. You found my grandfather's medallion. I can't wait to put it on. I'm wearing it. Welcome to Yellow Diamond, my friend. A spectacular world of Hollywood actors and low-resolution nudity awaits you just behind this door.
That was one of the first times I saw your sketches on YouTube. I mean, you clearly... You obviously do like retro games and those kind of like point and click style things.
Yes, I love Tex Murphy, and
yeah,
the look of it is Tex Murphy, but the showing every object is more Broken Sword, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
To its credit, Broken Sword was one of the few games that actually wrote good responses for almost every object on almost every character.
And I love
many didn't bother with.
I love the fact that the if you get the right script, it triggers the sunglasses take off.
Yes, the repeated sunglasses taking off is. Well, it could be. I wish it was a reference to Doctor Strangelove, because George C. Scott keeps putting a new piece of chewing gum in his mouth in each take.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
So every time it cuts to him, he's doing that. But it's actually a reference to Ripper, where what's his name, Christopher Walken.
Oh, okay, right.
At the start of dialogue, takes his cigar out of his mouth and never puts it back in, but it's back in again, and he takes it back out every single time you talk to him, and he knows what he's doing because he doesn't respect him.
Are there what are your kind of favorite sort of adventure games of that era? Then, what kind of things did you like playing?
The most enjoyable ones, or the ones that are actually good, because it does vary.
Well, both, I guess.
Broken Sword is a classic, obviously. Monkey Island. I'm a big fan of The Curse of Monkey Island. I said that as if that's a radical.
Yeah. What?
Sorry to shock you. Can I shock you? But I actually like The Curse of Monkey Island.
Yeah.
But no, I do think some of the hardcore retro game fans prefer Monkey Island too. But I think which is very good.
Yes.
But I think
it's fine. Don't worry. You don't have to.
The coming together of movie quality animation.
Yeah.
And really good jokes and puzzles and writing. I think that just Curse of Monkey Island is really, really good, and I do love the traditional 2D animation.
Yeah.
I try not to be nostalgic about it, because it's just not a financially viable way of making games. So unless you're Gibbous, it's pretty much not a financially viable way of making games these days. I don't know how they do it.
We've made a Cthulhu adventure, and they're also making. Can't remember what they're making next, but yeah.
Yeah, and it is traditionally 2D animated. I'm nostalgic for that, like everyone else, because I was 14, and you go, oh wow, this is what video games are going to be like forever.
Yeah.
And then they stop being like that because it was never financially viable. And
yeah.
When it occurred to me recently that Broken Sword is the only sort of big 2D adventure game that got a sequel with essentially the same aesthetic.
Yeah, because I guess Monkey Island.
If you look at Monkey Island, they switched to really unattractive 3D for Monkey Island 4, and like Toonstruck and other expensive-looking games were just flops, because it's really expensive to make games like that. And there wasn't. I can only assume that the publishers quite reasonably thought that they were going to make a lot of money on these games, and that they didn't. And so I think, if you're maybe not your age, if you're my age, we sort of thought, oh, this is what it's going to be like. And I think it was never really a viable way of making video games. And so we should be glad that there's a whole and much more diverse array of indie developers making things, relatively speaking, on the cheap, rather than loads of money getting thrown at these gorgeous but financially doomed projects.
Electric Dragon in the chat makes a fair point that yes, Broken Sword 3 and 4 did go 3D with not great results. That's true. Yeah.
Well, I think they have dated. I think 3D dates a bit more quickly than 2D, but I quite liked. I have liked all of the Broken Sword games.
I think it's because the story is great, and
Yeah, I don't even mind pushing crates around a little bit, but but I do think the first one has There are so many problems in the point and click genre, I've made a couple, so I'm responsible for having not solved those problems. Don't claim to be a sort of a great originator myself.
Yeah.
When it comes to point and clicks, there are so many problems with the genre that the original Broken Sword solved. When you look back at some of the classics of the 90s, you go, oh, you solved this. They have a reputation for having been all these crazy puzzles, and you've no idea what you're doing. You've got a million inventory items, and I think the best examples from the 90s don't do that very much, with a few exceptions. And for some reason in this century, we have chosen to imitate some of the worst elements of point and click games. I think my controversial opinion is that a lot of Euro adventure games from 2000 to 2010 I don't like.
Yeah. Okay.
There's some good ones.
Yeah.
I think there might be an anglophone. I'm reluctant to. Obviously, there are several things going on. One is that the games are much cheaper than the games I'm comparing them to. But also, I think when I'm playing LucasArts games or even Sierra games, which I think are not good generally, apart from Gabriel Knight.
Yes, thank you. That's the caveat.
Yeah. Gabriel Knight's good, but apart from that, when I was playing those games, I was playing them in the first language, whereas European players were playing them in a second language, possibly badly translated. I don't know. And around the turn of the millennium, I suddenly started playing loads of German and French and Ukrainian games, quite badly translated into English. So there was a precipitous drop in my enjoyment of those games, which perhaps wasn't as obvious and Spanish. Perhaps if you were always playing in a second language, it isn't as obvious.
Yeah.
There was a big shift in the. I have a feeling that puzzles like the Monkey Wrench puzzle, which only works if you're American, doesn't even work if you're British.
Yeah, in Monkey Island.
Because it's a pun that only works if you call those things monkey wrenches. I have a feeling that puzzles like that led people playing them in a second language to think that just the craziness, the nonsensicalness of it was the gag. And so
probably.
That we should imitate that and make things and do puzzles that make no sense, and do puzzles where it's like you've got a million inventory items and it doesn't make any sense and you just got to randomly try things. That's what fun is. And yeah, maybe it was, but we're all quite busy now and middle-aged, so I just don't have the time.
And I think, because Mortal Beryl in the chat says, elaborate on what you think the bad bits are, but you've kind of said it there. It's the moon logic, it's the nonsensicalness of it.
Yes, the moon logic I'm not really a fan of. The problem with games without moon logic is that they're just much easier. It's very hard to create a hard point-and-click game, which is a traditional point-and-click game, and not have moon logic to make it harder. Which is why some of the best adventure games, more broadly speaking, are things like Obra Dinn and The Outer Wilds, which aren't about combining inventory items to create an object, because it's just hard to come up with puzzles like that which are difficult and fair at the same time.
Do they have to be difficult though, or do you think that's like a part of the genre where people require?
Frankly, I don't miss trying everything on everything, and I don't miss wandering around with no idea what to do. And I do think I think one of the problems is a lot of games, a lot of adventure games rely on you wanting to do something because it can be done. And for me, this is so. Hopefully, this is something that your chat is interested in. I'm really getting into my my opinions here. So I think Roberta Williams and Sierra games. I can't remember where, but I'm sure I've heard her say that she saw video games as a puzzle box, and that's obvious in the way most of those Sierra games worked, which is the entire gestalt of the game is a puzzle. And if you find a gemstone in a cave, the question is, why has that been placed there by the games master, the nefarious person with whom I'm competing, the programmer or writer? Why is that there? I'm going to pick that up because I can't wait to find where that slots in or who I can give that to, because the whole game is a piece of theatre. The whole game is a puzzle box in which everything is connected, and I am here to try and work that out.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the much better LucasArts games realize that stories are driven by character and puzzles are driven by narrative. And so I think it's much better in games where characters are doing things. Characters are obstacles. Adventure games could be seen as a series of locked doors, but it's
Yeah.
great when the character who's blocking your way has a reason for wanting something. It's great when that reason is sort of something that comes out of character, and it's great when that maybe folds into the themes of the game, or
Yeah.
tells
Yeah.
you something about the world of the game, or is just funny and
Yeah.
entertaining in itself. And an awful lot of games rely on the player going into the cave just to see what's in the cave, and exploration can be good, but there are other media where exploration is just more like, it's more fun to explore a space in 3D than it is in 2D. It's way more fun to wander around a cave system in 3D than it is to point and click and wait for a character to walk somewhere. That's
Yeah.
just not as interesting. You're not really exploring in the same way. And so a lot of those games, when you play them, involve you making an incremental step forward, and you achieved it, and then you're back to a state of, so what's changed? I'll just wander around the entire map trying to find if I can now do something else with this new piece of information or this new object I've gained. And it's much better, I think, when the protagonist has a goal they're trying to achieve, and you, the player, are trying to assist them in that goal. And you're able to sort of look ahead in the story and go, okay, well, this is what I'm trying to do, and I'm strategizing and moving towards that.
How did you find creating your own games, such as Nelly Cootalot, then, and sort of, trying to take those thoughts into it?
Well, I made a couple of pirate point-and-click adventure games, which you should never do. It was a terrible mistake. So it's like it's ludicrous.
What, because
for me
everyone will just think of Monkey Island, you mean?
Well,
or?
I learned many lessons, but the main one is don't do that.
Yeah.
It's been very good for me. People play them, people still message me and say they like them, and when people buy them, I get money. So the whole thing has worked out brilliantly, without them being in any way a hit, or one of the big small games that some adventure games occasionally manage to break through onto that level of oh, it's the biggest game nobody's heard of kind of level. Mine is one of the small games nobody's heard of. But I think what they are is quite adventure games that are slightly better than you would expect, because of because the genre, because being pirate games, they're derivative. I started them out as a bit of fun, and because I wasn't doing comedy then, as an excuse to write jokes.
Yeah.
And what I've realized is that if you're going to pastiche or rip something off, you need to rip everything off. Like Stranger Things is very successful because it's a collage of loads of things that we remember from the 80s.
Yeah.
But if it had just been E.T., people would go, I think this is too similar to E.T., and they would not have watched it.
It's true.
And for an indie developer's point of view, there's very limited real estate on the kind of websites that cover the kind of games we play, and and streamers like you've only got so much time, and loads of people are making things, and I think one of the things, I don't want to use a crass word like hook. The problem with saying, "Hey, I've written a funny pirate game," is people look at it and they go, "I think I know what that is. I don't need to play that to find out what that is." That's and if you do play it, you'll find out actually this is quite well written, and it's not just a homage to the games of the 90s. It's got some good jokes in it.
Yeah.
But that's if you play it. If you don't play it, you won't find that out, and it will be better to have a hook which makes people go, oh, I wonder what that is. What interesting spin has this game put on that? Which I didn't know. I was a mere child. I was a 27-year-old child. I was naive.
And how did you get involved with? I guess speaking about adventure games and that kind of genre, how did you get involved with the Adventure X then?
Well, I'd always been around on the Adventure Game Studio forum, hanging out with all the cool guys were there, like Dave Gilbert, and that's there are other cool guys. I was about to
It's just Dave.
About to slander a lot of
He's
people.
always
on that
there.
forum, but mainly Dave. He's the coolest, probably.
Yeah.
And Francisco and other people who've very successfully made adventure games using Adventure Game Studio. So I'd been hanging out there since about 2003, not really making any games. But I I went along to the organisers of Adventure X were doing it perfectly well without me, but I went to the narrative. What do they call it? Like the symposium for narrative at GDX one year.
Oh, right, okay.
Is GDX still a thing? I can't remember what it's called.
GDX.
Has it changed its name?
Do you
I
mean
can't remember.
in where?
Or
Where? Oh, do
in
you mean
Tobacco
EGX?
Docks in London. Maybe EGX. Have I just
EGX, yeah. You're thinking of
EGX?
GDC and EGX, but I think
I
EGX.
combined them. Yeah.
It's just confusing. There's just a lot
I
of
don't go to these things.
initials.
Too many initials. Give things different names.
Yeah.
So I went to and it was packed with people, and I thought there are more people here than come to Adventure X
Yeah.
in this section of this event, which is not to criticise the event, but it's like, oh, so there is an audience for this.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
just
Okay.
or at least you can get 150 people crammed into a room because they really want to hear someone talking about Telltale, which was still a going concern then, and. So I got involved to help run a Kickstarter because a bit of money to help fund it helps, but also because a Kickstarter is advertising. So
Yeah.
Kickstarter serves two purposes. That's a tip for game developers, which I think everyone knows.
Yeah.
The main purpose of a Kickstarter is to let people know about the game, and so I started out originally just crowdfunding, and ended up helping and hosting. This year, for the first time in a decade nearly, I didn't organize anything.
Yeah.
I just turned up and helped host. So, but in previous for the last few years, I did lots of the design stuff for the marketing, and helped choose which talks and which games were selected. So it was lovely this year not doing any of that and just being surprised. It was lovely for two reasons. One, because it's loads of work. But also it was lovely to see games at the event that I hadn't already had to sort of go, yeah, okay. And also I hate rejecting games because lots of good games get rejected because, for instance, we've already got 3 animal detective games this year, and so we can't have a 4th animal detective game. If for some reason the animal detective genre is
very
thriving
popular.
at the moment.
Yes.
But that, which is not to say that all the animal detective, there's only so many you can have, and so it's horrible to sort of say no to good games. And we've rejected games that I now have gone on to play and love.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because they're really good, but it's how it is.
We should say, obviously, I'm sure most people in the chat know, like Adventure X is obviously this narrative. I suppose, how would you describe it? To kind of,
it's the world's only, at the time of coming up with that slogan, narrative games convention.
Yeah,
although it's not now. But I don't know if we've updated the website. I'm not in charge of that anymore.
Well.
Now it's one of the world's only conventions dedicated to narrative-driven games. So we have it's a fairly small affair. I think it's sort of 500 or 600 people this year. But it's it's moved on from being a room above a pub to being a really well-attended event with loads of writers, critics, and developers giving talks about their work, and people showing off indie games. A lot of point and clicks, but not exclusively. I think that was the other thing that I if I had some influence over the event, I thought broadening it from being an adventure game event to being a narrative game event. We still don't get loads of interactive fiction. We don't get loads of VR.
Yeah.
But occasionally people do submit them, and that's good. RPGs are probably quite well represented in the mainstream, so we tend not to have traditional CRPGs, at least. But I tend to. I'm not a fan of narrowing down genre categories. I think that being too strict about what an adventure game is, I think, doesn't really benefit.
I was going to say that must be kind of a difficult one, because I'm sure there were some games this year, for example, that had some people thinking, "What is this? Is an adventure game? Is this an adventure game?" But I'm guessing you stand on the more side of. I mean, what would you kind of use as categories then? Is it more about the story or?
Broadly speaking, I think the category I try and follow is, if this came out in the 90s, would it have been regarded alongside Myst and Monkey Island? Because the fact that Myst and Monkey Island are both adventure games is absurd, because they're so technically different.
Yeah,
I suppose in a sense they are both point and click. They're both run through the mouse. So you've got that, except that we know that King's Quest is also an adventure game, and you do that through the keyboard. So if we triangulate Myst, King's Quest, and Monkey Island, there's a huge range of interfaces that can cover an adventure game. And the thing that they have in common is characters and story. Now, obviously, mainstream games have finally learned that those things are good, and you can get pretty good stories and fun characters in mainstream games. We don't have a monopoly on that anymore over here in Nerd Corner. But so now, when and I do have these arguments with people where people say, "Oh, Disco Elysium isn't an adventure game, or the Telltale games aren't adventure games, or these FMV game isn't." Like Sam Barlow's FMV games. Like, they are, because if they came out in the 90s, they would be regarded as classics. Obra Dinn, if it had come out in 1998, would be regarded with exactly the same level of awe and reverence that it is regarded now. But it would also be regarded definitely as an adventure game, because people are only interested in, I think, sort of coming up with an ever narrower definition of what is a real point and click.
Yes.
I saw someone say of one of Francisco Gonzalez's games that it wasn't a point and click game because it didn't have inventory. It didn't have an inventory, so it's not a point and click game. It's like, well, at some point you have to accept that you're just complaining that every game isn't Monkey Island.
Yeah.
It's at some point you have to admit that, and you're correct. Some games aren't Monkey Island.
Yeah.
I mean, mine is, but not every game is, and that's fine. What's the use? I think because if you insist that it has to be 2D and it has to be mouse driven, and it has to have an inventory, and if we insist on it having. What we're saying is that this genre can never move beyond the technical limitations of the late 90s.
Yeah.
And we're also saying that we're just never going to get. You're never going to get games that look like that with what at the time I guess would have been a AAA budget, for relatively speaking. Broken Sword was a pretty big game.
Yeah.
It was number 2 in the charts in the UK when it came out. Like, you're just not going to get it. It's not economically viable. So, do you want these games or not? Because if you want them, we've got loads of them, and some of them are really good. But if you're going to insist on applying weird categories to them, you're not going to get to enjoy all the richness that there is.
Do you think I think that's kind of tricky at the moment. I feel like indie devs are sort of in a place where they are either wanting to throw back to those nostalgic projects and get that audience of people who obviously really love those games, or they can try and do something that feels modern and capture that kind of audience, but will obviously have that some people saying, well, this isn't an adventure game. And I don't know if people are in a difficult place right now with that kind of thing.
That's true. I think, generally speaking, we can do what I should have done, which is just ignore people who are obsessed with whether something is not an adventure game. Like, the fact that some people don't regard Disco Elysium as an adventure game doesn't seem to have hurt the game. I think
no, it's
still
done all
regarded
right, hasn't it?
Quite a good game. It's quite successful. It simply doesn't matter. Which is bizarre, because I think Unavowed is definitely regarded as a point-and-click adventure game, even though it's exactly the same in as much as it's a point-and-click adventure game with RPG mechanics included. And that's what Disco Elysium is. So why is it different? I guess it's because Dave Gilbert made Unavowed, and he makes point-and-click adventure games.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe that one's not either. Maybe 2 of the most successful and best adventure games of recent years aren't adventure games. Well, I don't know why you would want that. I feel it's a little bit like, I was about to have a go at Linux, so I probably shouldn't say that. It's safe. If you're making an indie game, people will be on at you about how important it is to support Linux, and it is important because Linux is a good thing. We should support those people, but it's also a lot of work.
Yeah,
for what you realise is 5 really noisy people who want to play on Linux. So it's you should make a game for Linux, but you shouldn't prioritize the vocal minority who have very, very strong opinions about these issues, and you should aim for trying to make a good game that will appeal to everyone, or at least some people.
Is that a sort of mentality you take into your sketches? Because I'm just you put a lot of effort into. I want to, if I'm able to I want to show at least a bit of a recent one you did of the. Let me swatch the screen whilst you just look at my
Can I still talk?
face.
Can people
You
still
can
hear
still
me?
talk. Yes, they can still hear you. So I should have
Yeah.
said that in the first instance.
This is I think it's probably one of the sketches that in which people have angrily replied the same comment
Yes.
most frequently, which is people going, "This is absolutely nothing like Hollow Knight," which is, to be fair, true. I just I feel like I have to individually explain to them that when I called the sketch every indie game, I was being hyperbolic, and it in fact does not cover every indie game.
Yes.
But
It's
what
like,
it
guys,
actually
come on!
covers
I
is
have to have a title that's snappy that people are
it's
going to
only
click on.
30 seconds long.
Yeah.
How do you think I could possibly cover every indie game in this?
Yeah. I've shown a bit of it there. It's just doing the gauntlet of the badly optimized platforming
Yes.
segment there, which I thought was a pretty genius. But I mean, I'm interested in how you kind of come up with these sketches, because each one, I might be wrong, but each one seems to have a lot of workload involved. So are there ones that you?
I do put effort. There are some that do take more and some that take less effort, and annoyingly, they aren't always correlated to how well the videos do. my spoof of stop motion Christmas
I saw
video
that,
from
yes.
last year. That one did not do particularly well and took so much effort. Like,
How
it's a
long did
short,
it take you?
I have no idea. Luckily, I don't usually work in December, as I told you earlier.
Yeah,
I take
yeah.
December off, so
Right.
that isn't true. Listen, I don't take December off. I'm exaggerating. But I do think it's funny, and I've said this to people before. I think putting too much effort in makes things better. I think part of what's funny about doing something stupid is putting too much effort in and taking it too far. I mean, obviously, these are only 30-second long videos, so
Yeah, but
I
even
could put
so,
more effort in.
You've created.
But I do have to create a lot of stuff for them.
Yeah.
Of course, in the case of the indie game, because I'm spoofing indie games, I used stock elements to build the world.
Yeah.
Stock assets, because that's quite an easy way of making games, and people do that. I mean, it might have been more fair to say every single game that's exhibited at Adventure X, but even then, I think that still wouldn't be accurate. But I don't want to have a go at them. I really like these games.
I know. Everyone be like, why is Alasdair
Why's he
Beckett-King?
having a go? Yeah, I'm cool now, guys. I hate these nerd games.
They'd
for
be like,
losers.
oh my God. Because I was just fascinated with, and each sketch, there's a completely different feel to it. There's, kind of a different kind of, obviously, techniques and skills that go into it. Is that your kind of brand now? Is that your thing? Is that what's happening?
I don't think I'm savvy enough to have a brand. I think there's two things. One is that a desire to do a particular style is a good motivator for making a video, because it takes ages to make a video and I can never be bothered. So I go, okay, well, for this one, I'm going to make a little scene in Godot and have the camera run around, and that's something I haven't done before, so it'll be fun or interesting to do that. And it always turns out to be actually miserable and annoying to do it. But I think it's going to be fun, and that's what gets me started doing it. And the other thing is that probably the way to actually be successful on the internet is to find something that works and then lean into that and do that again and again and again, and build up a following. Being that, oh, you're the guy that does that thing, and I suppose I do that to some extent. I do.
Yeah.
I have lots of videos called every something, but that is just a convenient way of naming a video on YouTube. A lot of them are me talking to someone else who is also me on a green screen. So I'm not saying I completely reinvent the wheel each time, but I'm not doing recurring characters. I'm not trying to come up with recurring characters.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm often specifically trying to do something different for the next video, although my last two were about games. But the good thing about the animated ones is I don't have to put a green screen up, so it means it saves time. And it's easier to do animation piecemeal, whereas if I'm doing a video where I'm, for want of a better word, acting, basically I have to block out a serious chunk of time and do it all in that time. Whereas if I'm very busy, if I'm running around doing gigs and stuff like that, I can do a couple of hours of animation on a video and then just leave that and then come back and do a couple of hours more. So it's quite whenever you see an animated video popping up on my channel, what that means is that I was lazy or tired, and so I did animation instead of filming myself.
It doesn't come across like that though, but
Well, good. I aim for it not to come across like that.
I mean, speaking of the tour and gigs, tell us a bit about the tour that you're doing and you've got coming up. And will it? How's it going to work in terms of? Will it be straight stand up or what's it going
Great
to be like?
question. What the last show I toured was called the Interdimensional ABK, which I suppose it's slightly multimedia. There's a screen, and so there are animated bits. This is a reprise of my quite well reviewed sellout Edinburgh Fringe show in 2020. I can't remember. When was it? I can't. When was I've completely
Fringe.
blanked
The Fringe
on
was this.
when I did the Fringe. I didn't do it this year.
Okay.
But did I do it last year? Or I can't
Most.
remember. No, you don't know. This is the problem. So it's I have found that the hardest thing about doing the show is remembering things. My memory. I don't know if it's post lockdown.
I think
or
people
if it's
said
just
you did it
age.
last year.
I did it last. Oh, if someone in the chat knows, then that would be, I'm now looking
Maggie
at
says
my
you
year
did it.
calendar.
And Cantrip
Well,
adds the good point. People liked it whenever it was. So there you go.
that is thank you. But just get on with it, they're saying in the chat. It doesn't matter when it happened. So it's a reprise of a show called Nevermore, and so there's a mixture of videos, and this is the first show that I did completely after lockdown, so after having done videos online, and I had intended it to be just straight stand-up, but in the end it ended up having some videos in it, but it is mostly just stand-up because I was a stand-up comedian before I did any of this, so I'm not one of the people, brave souls, who start out by going viral and then have to try and come up with a live act to go with it, many of whom do that quite successfully, but I am a stand-up comedian. I am honestly a comedian, and so it is just stand-up.
We
It's
believe
just normal
you.
stand-up. It's quite good normal stand-up is my description of it. And it's not highly narrative, but the premise of the show is that I hate the sea, and I hate and fear the sea. So I hope to persuade everyone who comes along that the sea is our enemy, and something's got to be done about it, because a lot of comedians these days are afraid to say what they think. And I'm not going to be censored. I'm not going to self-censor. I'm just going to go out there and say, don't like the sea.
Okay, right. Thank you for that.
Too salty.
I look forward to. I'm definitely going to be there when it comes down to London. If any of the people in here do go and watch this, is there some kind of secret word for a heckle they could say that shows that they've seen this?
The secret heckle is respectful silence,
right?
And interspersed with laughter. That is the ideal. There is no golden heckle that will result in a positive response.
You'll be like, Have you ever had some, what's kind of the weirdest sort of heckles or feedback or sort of critiques that you've heard whilst you've been doing this?
Feedback and critiques is generous. Broadly speaking, I'm quite good at comedy, so I don't have I don't fail that much. But obviously, every comedian,
I didn't say you were,
even good ones, do die on stage and have really bad gigs. I think probably the worst. Well, it was quite funny, but probably the worst start to a gig was a very drunk guy walking into the small room I was performing in at the Edinburgh Fringe with a tray. I don't even know if he had a tray. He had 3 pints of beer in his hands, so he was planning to get more drunk. And he stumbled and fell backwards and tipped his 3 beers down me on stage, because that's how small the room is. Like he was walking in, he was walking past me. And then to try and steady himself, he grabbed a hold of the chairs, which were sort of theatre-style chairs with flip down, which are screwed into the ground. And he fell back so heavily, he pulled the chairs out of the plywood they were screwed down into, and so they ripped up from the floor. And then tried to fix them, but he was so drunk. And so I was sort of wrestling him for the chairs to just say, no, you can't sit in those chairs. Are out now. We need to move past the chairs. So I had to sort of pull them away from him and then slide them behind a curtain to get him to stop sitting in them. And it was at the time it was actually very funny.
Yes.
But it's a tough way to start a show
Yeah, I bet.
because
Did you mention
no
it on?
jokes after that.
No.
I obviously I acknowledged it
Yeah.
because it was happening and the audience were laughing. But what I should have said, if that happened now, I would have just leveled with the audience and gone, look, the rest of the show isn't going to be as funny as that.
Yeah,
because that was weird. And our carefully written jokes are not going to be better than that. But I didn't have the chops. I didn't have the experience of stand up to realize that. So I knew it inside.
Yeah.
But I just plowed on and did the show and introduced other people, and we all had a bit of a dud show because we'd had that magical moment at the start. So now hopefully I would know better how to channel that magic into the show itself.
Past the tour, what other things are you working on? Have you got your eye? I mean, have you ever been asked to do Taskmaster, Alasdair?
No,
Would you do it?
Imagine if I'd turned it down.
I know. That's true, actually.
No, I don't think so. Not for me. I won't be told what to do.
Alasdair,
of course,
what are you doing?
Yeah, my agent going, no, obviously I haven't been asked because obviously the answer.
You'd have said yes, yeah.
Anybody would.
The question really should have been, would you do it? And I'm
yes,
guessing the answer is yes.
I would love to do that, but the question has for some reason not been asked. I'm wait and see. I've got. I'll have another. I've published 2 children's murder mysteries this year. I didn't write them both this year, but I did publish them both this year. So I'll have another one of those next year coming out. I think the autumn. Okay. And another one the year after that, which I haven't written at all. So I better get started.
How do you have the time for all of this?
Yeah, it's been quite tiring actually. Yeah. I've been quite, and since I take December off, as you know, it's really crams it into the preceding 11 months. Yeah, it's been very, very tiring.
Right. Well, on that note, I don't know if anyone has got any.
I feel like the interview was like 75% me complaining about Sierra games, I think, and I didn't mean it to be like
that. Listen, I'm a LucasArts fan, so that's fine by me. I think it is a valid point that.
Screw you, Williams, Roberta Williams.
That's not
what
the
do you
point
know,
I'm
you pioneer of the games industry? What do you know?
They were great. They were great at the time, and
important.
But we've moved on, and we can move on, and we don't have to keep looking back in the past to make great.
Another controversial opinion is that Gabriel Knight 3 is quite good, and the reason that we remember the cat moustache puzzle is that it's an unusually bad puzzle, like the Monkey Wrench puzzle.
Yes,
the game itself
it's a terrible puzzle, Alasdair.
It's a terrible puzzle in an otherwise quite well plotted game, and that's the reason it stands out.
Fine, fair enough. Gosh, you're just throwing out these controversies here.
I just thought I'd throw out there another truth bomb.
Let me just check that. I think I could end this because I know you've got to head off. But is there any? I think. Well,
I just bored the chat. The chat all like, this is enough.
I think one of the main questions was just how do you have all the time to do this? But I think that's. Another question was which adventure game would you say has the best music in your opinion?
Oh. Well, and speaking of things that LucasArts solved, like the iMuse system in the old LucasArts games, is fantastic because there's no sort of abrupt transition from room to room. As you move around the space, different instruments come in and out because they're all playing on the same track. So yeah, I think there is, for me, the Monkey Island series and the music on that is just so instantly evocative of the game and still magical in every different version of it. I love it, but also a great example of how sophisticated the aesthetics of those games were. I don't have time to go into it. The way the camera moves in those Monkey Island games is also very, very good. A lot of your contemporary adventure games just have the camera locked to the character, whereas when you look at you've got a little area you can move around in with no panning, and then you move over here and it's cinematic camera moving as if there was an intelligent person behind the camera making a decision about what would create a nice frame. And it's amazing the amount of stuff they got right that we then forgot how to do.
Yeah.
Like making Roman concrete or something. We just don't have the technology anymore. Somehow we lost it. I don't think that's historically accurate. I think we do know how to make concrete.
Yes,
but
I believe we do. I don't know. I'll take your word for it, Alasdair, if you say.
We do still have concrete.
Good. Okay. Good. I'm glad we've quashed that rumor. I thank you so much, Alasdair.
Thank you for having me and for putting up with my rambles.
That's fine. That's kind of what this is what this stream is about anyway. If anything, you've been more coherent.
Good. I'm glad I've just upped that level a little bit.
Yeah. All right. But genuinely, thank you so much. Really looking forward to the tour. I will put either underneath the video or I'll put in the chat right now where everyone can check that out, because I'm sure everybody wants to see you. And
well, I hope so. Yes, please do come, because it makes the whole thing more viable if you do.
Yeah.
It's really hard work if the audience doesn't turn up. It really.
And
really
just silence and laughter is what you want.
It's important to judge when silence and when laughter, but hopefully it'll be obvious from the cues.
Good stuff. Thank you so much, Alasdair. Alasdair Beckett-King, thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Keep waving.
More waving. Bye.